Moving on now, and I want to talk about how to build a meal replacement. Now this is a little tutorial, and this comes under the heading of substitutions. So this tutorial, I'm going to teach you exactly how you would go about actually building a meal replacement if you were stuck. So the first question that comes up is, well, why would you be building a substitute? Why would you be building this meal replacement? And the obvious answers are, well, number one, for convenience. It's not always that easy to take, beans and protein and all these kinds of things with you wherever you go. And the second reason could be a lack of availability. So, you end up in a situation where those kinds of foods that you want to be eating with this lifestyle literally just aren't available. So in that circumstance, obviously, you try and make the best of the situation that you've got. And that's really what this meal replacement tutorial is all about. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that these meal replacements are going to help you lose fat at the same rate as a whole food meal, but generally speaking, these are aimed at helping you not stop your fat loss. They're aimed at helping you not slow it down by too much. And that really is kind of the mindset that we want to come into this with. So we're going to start off with our meal template, and that's the first step, that we think back and we think, well, I normally have beans or lentils, a low-fat protein, and a low-starch vegetable. And that really is that's the simple basis of the meals that we eat. And then we look at, well, what do I need to replace in this meal? Is it that I don't have any beans or lentils on hand? And if that's the case, you're replacing a low-fat, high-fiber carbohydrate. On the other hand, if you don't have a low-fat protein available, well, literally that means that you're just needing to replace something that's going to give you a lot of protein and basically no carbohydrate and very low on fat. Likewise, if you're missing the vegetables, you're going to be missing out on fiber, a small amount of carbohydrate, and a lot of micronutrients. So it's important to think through, and it doesn't need to take a long amount of time, but just think about what are you actually going to be replacing. And it's not so much what the food looks like necessarily, it's more about the nutrition that's in that food. So what you want to try and do is substitute one item for a replacement of similar nutritional value. And by similar nutritional value, I mean the number of calories that it has in the serving size that you're going to eat, and also similar nutrients. So nutrient levels in terms of carbohydrate, fiber, protein, and fat. And I know this is maybe sounding a little bit complex right now, so I want to give you a few examples, and I think that's going to help you understand how you could do this. So in one example, let's say you've got no way to cook meat and you don't have any tuna or anything with you, nothing like that. So you look at the meal template and you say, well, I've got some beans on hand. For example, you might have a bean salad that you've made with some spinach and some beans already, but you don't have a meat. And so you say, well, I'm going to be replacing the low-fat protein part of this meal. So then perhaps the alternative, the convenient alternative, for example, if you have a shop nearby or something like that, is a cottage cheese. And like we said, a probably higher fat but low carbohydrate cottage cheese. Now you'll probably eat about as much of this cottage cheese as you need, and you can check the nutrition panel for this and the serving size, but just to get around 20-25 grams of protein for that meal. So that's one example where you've been able to replace a low-fat protein with something that you wouldn't normally otherwise eat, but you've still had a complete meal that's actually, quite reasonable. Now the second example I've got, you might need a portable solution, something where you just can't really bring a lot of stuff along with you. So in that case, for example, you might be switching your low-fat protein with maybe some natural whey protein powder made with cinnamon and mixed in with water. And in this case, again, you might be able to pack in, a bean and broccoli cold salad or something like that, because it's quite easy to bring something like that along with you in a container. But the third example is a really good example of how you could build a complete meal replacement when you're really, really stuck and you don't have a lot of ingredients on hand. And this could be something that could be portable. It really just depends a little bit. But one suggestion, and something that I've done in the past, is replacing the low-fat protein with a protein bar. And that's why I generally keep a couple in the car with me. And look for a protein bar. For example, the one that I really prefer has around 20 grams of protein, but it also has some of that polydextrose that we've talked about. So it's quite high in fiber. It's also very, very low in carbohydrates. So that really is it's a low-fat protein replacement, but it also comes along with quite a lot of fiber. Now, because it's got quite a lot of fiber with it, that then kind of opens up the field a little more in terms of the carbohydrate that we can include in the meal. because the carbohydrate normally would be a low-fat, high-fiber carbohydrate, we can actually look at the fiber that comes in with the protein bar and think, well, the carbohydrate we can probably relax a little more on just in this particular case because we're eating this as a complete meal. So an example of this that I've done is I actually used a small amount of rice, but other suggestions would be, you might even have a piece of bread or even some kind of lower starch vegetable, for example, like sweet potato. It really just depends on the circumstances that you're in. Now, as far as a vegetable goes, you might be in a situation where you've got some carrots or something like that, and so you could add that to this combination. Now, because this is a fairly unique situation, I wouldn't be really thinking that this meal or this meal replacement that I've just made for myself, that I've just created, is necessarily going to help me lose any fat. But what I would expect is that it's probably going to keep me on course, and it's probably not going to disrupt fat loss by too much at all. Now that said, if you started following this and trying to have one of these meals every day, for example, I think you probably would end up noticing a difference, but of course everyone is different. So that's a few examples of some meal replacements that you could build. And like I say, it's always important to just start with the meal template, because that's really what can help you think about what things you need to replace, and then as you saw in those examples, how you might replace them with different kinds of foods that might be more available or easier to bring with you, etc., etc. So have a think about that, and hopefully by knowing this information, it's going to really help you out if you do end up finding yourself in one of these situations where you just don't have the regular kinds of meals or the regular kinds of foods available.